One of the greatest influences in our society and in our individual lives is the music to which we listen. It causes a response in every level of our consciousness and each atom of our being. Therefore, the composer holds great power and consequently a great responsibility to the public. His compositions are dependent upon his ideals and the level of his attunement. In music and art should the entity excel. Thus, there should be the turning within, with the relying upon him, who is able to supply the needs of the spiritual, the mental, and material things. For the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the cattle on the hills, the silver and the gold, and only in him may ye find that full, complete independence which is necessary in the experience of the entity if it would succeed. Thus, apply self in the spiritual and mental things, that the material expression and the music may find that which may be as from the spheres. But let thy prayer ever be, quote, Lord, let me be the channel for supplying that in the experiences of those with whom I come in contact, and for those the needs of man at this particular period, that they may know thee better through the things which they have suffered and do suffer. May they purify their souls, that they may appear before the throne of grace in the seeking. Let me, O God, in my music, in my heart, give that which is a helpfulness to that in the lives of others. End of quote. How may one begin to learn this attunement? It comes by learning to listen, and as we do so, our hearing becomes more acute. Here is one entity who may write, shutting itself away and attuning itself by very distant music, and especially bells. Perhaps the singing of the bird is more easily discerned than a faraway bell. But we are then confronted with the suggestion that we listen to life rising in a tree. Listen at the birds. Watch the blush of the rose. Listen at the life rising in the tree. These serve their maker through what? That psychic force that is life itself in their respective sphere, that were put for the service of man. Learn thine lesson, O man, from that art thee. The ability to appreciate the sounds in nature is perhaps influenced by our experiences and may be the karmic result of past attention. There we find that the entity was close to nature, thus that innate desire to be, to know, those activities insane. Thus, as we find, the song of the bird, of the brook, of the wildlife of the community, of a nature unfoldment, is as much of music as any that may be the experience of the entity. But one brings the appreciation of the other. Yet, the entity feels deep within self that the orchestral rendition of a poem or of any experience is merely as a counterpart or an imitation of the real. For there was the communing with nature, seeing as it were the voice of the spheres envisioning the evening sun, in the shades of night falling, in the tempering of the winds, and seeing the activities of everything in nature be speaking that at-one-ment, that closeness which the heart and soul seeks for its greater expression in loving kindness and gentleness to its fellow man. As there is the music of the spheres, there is indeed the music of the growing things in nature. There is then the music of nature itself. There is the music of the growth of the rose, of every plant that bears color, of every one that opens its blossom for the edification, for the sanctification, even of the environs thereabout. Not only do we find this subtle music in the sounds of the earth, but in human beings as well, as illustrated by a reading given for a 4.5-year-old child. Hence, as the music of the spheres and the voice of nature itself, we find that expression in the laughter of the entity, in the sound of its voice, in the look of its eye, in the movement of its body, in the patter of its feet, giving expression in a manner that brings to mind and consciousness of those who seek to know God and God's way with the children of men, a manifestation and expression of the same. Not everyone who has developed musical talent in past lives was advised to pursue music as a profession, but many were told to use their talents to influence others for good. Before that, we find the entity was in the land now known as the Promised Land. During those periods when there was much expectancy, much preparation on the part of those who were looking forward to the redeeming of the people from not only the bondage of the Roman rule, but the misconception and misapplication of the laws of individuals or people who professed to be in the way of the chosen people. The entity was among those who were the musicians in the temple where Anna and Simeon saw the consecration of the one Lord, the one Master. Then the entity was a harpist, or what would be called a harp today. Hence all manner of string instruments are of interest, and especially that character of nature of music that depicts the activities of individuals through those various periods in that particular activity, or that as may be a part of the experience of the individuals in the present. Not only that which is of the pictorial and pastoral nature, but descriptive in its nature. And to encourage and to bring into consciousness of the young and those of all ages whom the entity may meet and with whom the entity may have an influence, an appreciation of such is the greater service in which the entity may expend itself. For this is the manner of music in which distances may be spanned, in which all realms of thought may find a greater outlet of expansion, and in which the heart may be raised to a comprehension of the relationship. For, as if oft expressed, the angels sing, and the music of the spheres, as in the color and relationship, this becomes the means or manners that is universal in its activity upon the mind and souls of men. Parents whose son was only 11 months old were told that in a previous life the child had been a famous composer. In the musical abilities, should the entity be trained from the beginning, there is the natural intent and interest towards things of the artistic nature and temperament. There are the abilities to use the voice, as well as the abilities in playing most any instrument. If the opportunity is given, especially in the composition, in the natures of composition as well as playing itself. Symphonies, all forms of musical interludes and the like, should be the trainings to which the entity would be subjected, that it may be given the greater opportunities. And, as soon as he is capable of such, insist upon beginning with the piano as a playing, as a means of entertaining, and the natural ear for harmony will soon be indicated in the activities of the entity. Before this, the entity was in the Austrian or Hungarian land. There the entity was an unusual individual in the name Liszt, being a composer as well as a musician. And as its activities through the experience were such as to make for certain characters of music, these in part will be of especial interest to the entity in the present. The comparison may be easily seen, to be sure, as to the faults, the failures, as well as the activities in which the entity then throughout the experience rose to its place or position in the musical world. That is why, then, the nickname Franz is suggested for the entity was Franz Liszt.